La commission préféra s'accrocher à sa version des faits, sans tenir compte de l'avis du principal témoin du drame.
But unquestionably, when the first shot was fired, I recognized it as a shot. I thought of nothing else but that it was a rifle shot. I turned to my right. I had time to think. I had time to react. And I turned to my right to look back over my right shoulder to see if I could see anything unusual, and particularly to see if I could catch him out of the corner of my eye. Because I immediately thought...
Him, you mean
the president.
The president.
Because I immediately thought of an assassination attempt. The moment I heard the shot, I didn't see anything except just the general blur of waving of people moving. Nothing really unusual. I did not see the president out of the corner of my eye, and I was in the process of turning back to look over my left shoulder. And had about come to the point where I was looking straight forward again when I felt the impact of the bullet that hit me. I am convinced beyond any question of a doubt that the first shot that was fired did not hit me. Then I was hit.
Malgré la certitude du gouverneur Connolly d'avoir été touché par une autre balle, la commission refusa d'abandonner sa thèse du projectile unique pour 2 victimes. D'autres arguments lui furent alors opposés.
One of the major difficulties the Warren Commission had with the implementation of the single bullet theory as sort of a magic solution to the problems of evidence that they were faced with was the fact that Governor Conley and President Kennedy were not properly aligned for the single bullet to inflict all the non-fatal wounds.
When you study any frame of the Zapruder film prior to the shooting, you will see that Conley was seated essentially directly in front of Kennedy. There is simply no way for a bullet to have emerged from the midline of Kennedy's neck anteriorly, moving downward and to the left to get over to Governor Conley's right posterior axillary area, which means just behind the right armpit.
You know, if they could guide missiles like that bullet would have had to have been guided, it would be considered to be one of the wonders of the world today. Do you have any idea how many different directions it had to go to? It never had the same angle. It never had the same direction.
It is an absolute impossibility. Here again, when you say to these people, as I have on numerous occasions, orally in testimony, in my articles, as a member of the Forensic Pathology Panel of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, to my colleagues, how do you account for this? They just look at you and say, well, you don't really know what their positions were. They also say that doesn't the Stemmons Freeway sign block our view of them, and we don't know what happened. But then they ignore that which they know, but which they must set aside, and that is that the period of time that elapses behind the Stemmons Freeway sign is 0.9 seconds, or 9/10 of 1 second. So in other words, what they would have you believe is that in less than 1 second, Connolly, by some kind of prearranged, meditated move, went to his left, got shot, and came back to his right, and once again resumed the position directly in front of the president. It's nonsense. It is worse than being disingenuous. It is worse than trying simply to bend over, to be fair-minded and objective. It is, on the part of the investigators who know better, a blatant lie designed to mislead.
La thèse officielle concernant la trajectoire de la balle partait du principe que celle-ci avait traversé le cou de John Kennedy et était ressortie par la gorge. La commission se fondait, disait-elle, sur les résultats de l'autopsie pratiquée à l'hôpital militaire de Bethesda le soir de l'assassinat. Les conclusions de cette autopsie étaient de la plus haute importance pour les tenants de l'hypothèse de la balle unique. Pour que le projectile atteigne les 2 hommes à la fois, le projectile devait forcément ressortir par la gorge du président Kennedy, puis poursuivre sa course et frapper le gouverneur Connolly. Les résultats de l'autopsie furent cependant contestés sur plusieurs points essentiels. Beaucoup mirent en doute la thèse de la commission selon laquelle la balle était ressortie par l'avant et soulignèrent que les chirurgiens qui avaient opéré le président à Dallas n'étaient pas de cet avis. Pour ces derniers, la blessure de la gorge avait été provoquée par l'entrée d'une balle et non par sa sortie.
Well, Dallas is a large city, and there are many gunshot wounds that come into Parkland Memorial Hospital on a regular basis. This is a normal sort of life for a hospital in a big city, and especially Texas, where a lot of people carry guns. And when they looked at President Kennedy and his throat, they immediately concurred that he had been hit by a shot fired from the front.
The Parkland Hospital doctors held a press conference a few moments after the president was officially pronounced dead. At 2 points, Dr. Malcolm Perry said that when in response to questions he was asked, he said specifically that the wound in the front of the president's neck was a wound of entrance. And each time, his superior, Dr. Champ Clark, confirmed what Dr. Perry said. Now, the simplest way and the easiest way to make a pretty definitive determination is the size of the bullet hole. It almost invariably is true that on entering, the bullet makes the smaller hole. It makes a much larger hole in exiting. The size of the hole measured by Dr. Perry at the hospital was 3 by 5 millimeters. That's quite small. That's actually smaller than the size of the bullet, the diameter of the bullet itself. The hole in the president's back, according to the measurement made later at the Bethesda Navy Hospital, was almost twice that size. And on this basis alone, you would never expect the wound on the front of the president's neck to be a wound of exit.
Le constat des médecins de l'hôpital de Parkland était désastreux pour la version officielle. Il invalidait l'hypothèse de la balle unique et impliquait également la présence d'un second tueur devant la voiture, vraisemblablement sur cette pelouse. En fait, un certain nombre de témoins et de policiers avaient cru que les coups de feu provenaient de cet endroit. Mais un peu plus tard, devant la commission, les médecins avaient mystérieusement changé d'avis.
It's a strange thing, but when the doctors then testified before the Warren Commission, they changed their opinions. They said it wasn't a wound of entrance, but a wound of exit. Now, what would have caused professional men to change their mind? There's several things that came to play. First, public opinion came to be, where they said that Oswald was firing and it was from behind. But also, the Secret Service and the FBI had visited them, talked to them about their findings and so forth, and they'd shown them the autopsy report. And the autopsy report said that it was a wound of exit. And so they concluded, based upon the autopsy protocol, that they had been mistaken in their original perception of a wound of entrance.
Paradoxalement, les médecins de Dallas changèrent d'avis au vu du rapport d'autopsie, alors que les experts qui avaient pratiqué celle-ci n'avaient même pas remarqué l'orifice ouvert par la balle dans la gorge de John Kennedy.
They missed the wound in the front of the president's neck. They assumed that it was only a tracheostomy, a surgical incision made into the trachea, the windpipe, in order to facilitate breathing in a person who has sustained massive brain damage, such as happened in Kennedy's case. And they never learned until the next day that this was a tracheostomy superimposed upon a bullet hole. They did not trace out the bullet wounds in Kennedy's back or neck. They did not talk with the doctors, and they did not recognize then that this was a hole. This is incredible when you think about it, because the president died from gunshot wounds, and yet here we have people doing the autopsy who missed one of those wounds.
En réalité, les médecins qui réalisèrent l'autopsie ne surent pas vraiment interpréter les blessures du président assassiné. Dans le rapport officiel, ils ne parlent d'ailleurs que d'une blessure vraisemblablement d'entrée sur la nuque et vraisemblablement de sortie à la gorge. La commission n'hésita pourtant pas à faire reposer toute sa thèse sur cette incertaine constatation.
The difference between it being of entrance and of exit is as great a difference as there can be. So it's not acceptable to say that it's presumably a wound of entrance, but that's what they did.
Had this case ever gone to court, these pathologists would have been destroyed on cross-examination by a competent defense attorney.
Certains mirent en doute non seulement la validité de l'autopsie, mais également la compétence des médecins légistes qui l'avaient pratiquée.
The autopsy doctors were not the ones who should have been selected for this, because it was outside their experience. There's a big difference between studying forensic medicine in a short course, as a couple of them had, and having the day-to-day practice of dealing with murders. None of them had the experience of dealing with murders.